It had been nearly a decade since the horrific events surrounding the Babadook had taken place, but Amelia had managed to reclaim some semblance of normalcy. Her son, Samuel, was now a teenager, and together they had rebuilt their lives, burying the memories of that dark creature deep within the recesses of their minds. The house, though still filled with old echoes of past trauma, had become a place of quiet resilience. They never spoke of the Babadook. It was a shadow of the past they dared not awaken. But shadows, as Amelia would soon learn, have a way of creeping back into the light. It was early winter, and a heavy snow had settled over their quiet neighborhood, muffling the usual noises of the city. Samuel had grown into a bright, if somewhat reserved, young man. He was smart and observant, but the events of his childhood had left an indelible mark on him. Despite the therapy sessions, the reassurances from his mother, and the calming embrace of normal life, he always felt a faint chill whenever he walked past the basement door. That evening, as the wind howled outside, rattling the windows, Amelia and Samuel were finishing up dinner. The house was warm, the air filled with the scent of baked potatoes and roasted chicken. For a brief moment, the horrors of the past seemed far away, like distant thunder. They laughed at something silly on TV, and Samuel headed upstairs to work on his homework. Amelia sighed contentedly, clearing the dishes from the table. She was washing the last plate when she heard a faint noise, a light tapping sound like fingernails rapping on a wooden surface. She paused, turning off the water to listen more closely. There it was again, a slow, deliberate tap. Tap, tap. It was coming from the hallway. Her heart skipped a beat as she strained to listen. "It's nothing," she told herself, wiping her hands on a towel. Probably the house settling or the wind, but a gnawing unease settled in her stomach. She walked cautiously toward the hallway, her eyes scanning the shadows cast by the dim light overhead. The tapping stopped. Amelia stood there, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced at the basement door, its surface worn and scratched. That door had been the source of so many nightmares years ago. She took a deep breath, willing herself to move on, to let it go. Yet as she turned to walk back to the kitchen, she heard it, a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Baba! Duke! Duke! Duke!" The plate in her hand slipped, shattering on the hardwood floor. She froze, her blood turning to ice. This was impossible. They had defeated it. They had banished it, locked it away. It was over, wasn't it? She glanced upstairs where Samuel was, probably engrossed in his studies, oblivious to the fear gripping his mother. Amelia knew she had to keep it together, for his sake. She bent down to pick up the broken pieces of the plate, her hands trembling. As she gathered the shards, the whisper came again, this time louder, almost mocking her. "Baba? Duke! Duke! Duke!" Amelia stood up abruptly, clutching the pieces to her chest, her eyes wide and frantic. She ran to the kitchen, dumped the shards into the sink, and grabbed the phone. Her fingers hovered over the keypad as she considered calling her sister. But what would she say? That a children's storybook monster was back to torment them? She could already hear the dismissive responses. "It's just stress, Amelia. You're imagining things." A sharp, scraping noise broke her train of thought. Her eyes darted to the hallway, and to her horror, she saw it. The basement door was slowly opening, inch by agonizing inch. "No!" she breathed, backing away until her back hit the kitchen counter. "No, no, no!" From the darkness of the basement, a shape began to emerge. It was shrouded in shadows, a form that twisted and contorted as it slithered its way up the stairs. Long, spindly fingers reached out, tapping rhythmically on the wooden banister. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if savoring each moment of her terror. Amelia choked back a scream as the creature stepped into the hallway light. It was exactly as she remembered, tall, impossibly thin, wearing that nightmarish top hat and long, tattered coat. Its face, or what could be considered a face, was a ghastly, contorted mask of pale skin and hollow eyes, the mouth stretching into an unnatural, toothy grin. "Babadook," it rasped, its voice echoing through the house like a cold wind. Amelia stumbled backward, knocking over a chair in her panic. She had to get to Samuel. She had to get him out of the house. She turned and ran toward the stairs, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. She took the steps 2 at a time, shouting his name. "Samuel, get out, run!" She burst into his room, finding him standing by the window, his face pale with fear. He turned to her, his eyes wide and confused. "Mom, what's happening?" "It's here," she panted, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the door. "We need to get out, now." As they reached the top of the stairs, they froze. The Babadook was at the bottom, staring up at them with its unblinking, hollow eyes. It stretched its fingers along the banister, the sound of nails scraping against wood sending a shiver down their spines. Amelia backed away, pulling Samuel with her. "Get to the attic," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We can lock it in the house." They retreated down the hallway, the Babadook advancing slowly up the stairs. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, its limbs bending in ways that made Amelia's stomach churn. They reached the attic door, Amelia fumbling with the latch as Samuel pushed it open. "Hurry," he urged, glancing back to see the creature reaching the top of the stairs. They scrambled into the attic, slamming the door behind them. Amelia fumbled for the latch, locking it with shaking hands. They could hear the Babadook on the other side, its fingers tapping on the wood, a slow, methodical rhythm that echoed through the small space. "Baba-dook, dook, dook," it chanted, the sound grating against their nerves. Amelia grabbed a flashlight, scanning the attic for anything they could use. The space was cluttered with boxes and old furniture, relics of a life they had tried to move past. Samuel was breathing heavily, his eyes darting around in fear. "Mom," he whispered, "what do we do?" She wished she had an answer, but her mind was a whirlpool of panic and memories. How had they defeated it last time? It had been through confronting it, facing their fears head-on. But this time felt different, more tangible, more real. The door shook violently, the wood creaking under the pressure. The Babadook was pushing against it, its voice growing louder, more insistent. "Baba-dook! Dook! Dook!" Amelia gritted her teeth, looking at Samuel with determination. "We have to face it," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We have to show it. We're not afraid." Samuel nodded, though his face was pale. They stood together, facing the door as it rattled on its hinges. The Babadook's shadow loomed under the crack, writhing like a living thing. Amelia took a deep breath and stepped forward. "You don't control us," she shouted, her voice echoing through the attic. "You're not real. You're just a nightmare." The tapping stopped. The attic fell silent, the air heavy with tension. For a moment they thought it had worked, that their defiance had driven it away. But then, the door exploded inward, wood splintering, as the Babadook surged into the room. "No!" Samuel screamed, grabbing a metal rod from the clutter and swinging it wildly. The Babadook recoiled, hissing like a feral beast. It lashed out with its long fingers, knocking Samuel to the ground. "Get away from him!" Amelia shouted, charging at the creature with a broken chair leg. She swung it with all her might, connecting with its side. The Babadook screeched, a sound that pierced their ears and rattled their bones. It staggered back, its form flickering like a faulty projection. Amelia seized the moment, standing over Samuel protectively. "You can't have him!" she yelled, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and rage. "You can't control us," the Babadook hissed, its body twisting and warping as it shrank back into the shadows. For a brief second, its face contorted into a mask of pure fury, its hollow eyes burning with hatred. Then, with a final, ear-splitting screech, it collapsed into itself, vanishing into a cloud of darkness that dispersed into the air. Silence fell over the attic. Amelia stood there panting, her heart hammering in her chest. She looked down at Samuel, who was staring at the spot where the Babadook had disappeared. Is it gone?" he asked, his voice small. Amelia didn't know how to answer. She wanted to say yes, to reassure him that it was over. But deep down she felt that familiar chill, the one that whispered it was never truly gone. The Babadook was a part of their fear, a manifestation of the darkness within them. She pulled Samuel into a hug, holding him tightly. "For now," she said softly, stroking his hair. "For now, it's gone." They climbed down from the attic, their bodies heavy with exhaustion. The house was quiet, the air no longer thick with the presence of the creature. As they stepped into the hallway, Amelia glanced at the basement door, now closed and still. She didn't know when, or if, the Babadook would return. But as she locked the attic door behind them, she knew they had to stay vigilant. The Babadook thrived on fear, on the unspoken horrors that festered in the dark corners of their minds. They had faced it once more, and they would be ready to face it again if necessary. Because the Babadook wasn't just a monster, it was a reminder that fear, when left unchecked, could take on a life of its own, and they would have to keep fighting it, day after day, to keep the darkness at bay.